All right, everyone. Happy Monday. We are here. We are here for another episode of Just Shilling. Super psyched for this conversation. I hope that you all had a good weekend. So, want to welcome you to our incredible guest in Caspar, and he is from AminoChain. I'm sure that you all will love what he's got to share with you. But before we get into that, folks, just want to let you know that nothing that we discuss here is financial advice. All of the opinions shared are of our own and do not necessarily represent our respective organizations. And last but not least, anything that's probably a little bit too controversial for a family dinner during the holidays, we'll avoid that here. But got a lot of exciting stuff to chat about, and we're all adults. So welcome, 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 everyone. So for those that are not familiar with our awesome, incredible guest today, I'd like to welcome him to the stage. How's it going, man? Tell us who you are and what you're all about.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you so much for having me, Trevor. It's such an exciting time to be on your show. Super pumped for the hour of just chilling that we're about to have. My name's
Yeah.
Caspar. I am the founder and the CEO of AminoChain. I am originally from Cape Town, South Africa, so that's why I still got this accent. I grew up in Cape Town and in the United Kingdom. I did my undergraduate degree at University College London, where I studied economics and neuroscience as a dual bachelor. I spent some time working in financial sales in London and did a graduate degree in management and finance in London. And then around 3 years ago, I moved over to the United States. I did another graduate degree in biotechnology at Columbia University, and then spent some time working in B cell lymphoma research, so mostly on the clinical oncology side of things. Founded the AminoChain around 2 years ago. Initially went through a hackathon, so I think this might be the world's longest hackathon project because it's still ongoing. Went through a hackathon, went through an accelerator called Antler in New York. We got our initial bit of pre-seed funding. We built a prototype, and then got to building. 2 years later, we've now just closed our seed round. We raised around $5 million. It was led by A16Z Crypto. We're
Nice.
now at the point where we're hiring, expanding, getting hands on keyboards, and growing the initial vision. So exciting times.
Yes, yes. Well, 2025 is going to be a very interesting year, no doubt. So, you've had a really diverse career here. And as you mentioned, right, finance, the biotech, and now blockchain. So, what would you say is the common thread that ties all of these chapters of your life together?
It's such a fascinating question because I think, as Steve Jobs said in his like Stanford commencement speech, you can only really connect the dots looking backwards, right? So
Yeah.
now I find myself in this situation where I'm the founder of the startup and looking backwards, I'm trying to see what the common thread was. And I've actually reflected on it a little bit. The one answer that I really came up with was just curiosity. I think at every single one of stage of my life, I just remember to stay curious. And I think that's probably what led me to where I am today because I didn't
Mm.
know I had a passion for bioethics. I didn't even know I had a passion for blockchain, right? But what I did know was that I always was unsatisfied with certain things that were in front of me. So for example, my
Yeah.
undergraduate degree, I didn't just want to do neuroscience or didn't just want to do economics. I didn't want to do humanities or just pure natural sciences. It always had to be a mix of things. And I never knew what to stop wanting to learn. And so as you could see, right, like I've done a bunch of stuff, career-wise, professionally, but also I've been in a bunch of different universities and I've never really wanted to stop learning. So I think, when I was 18 and then when I was 21 and then when I was 25, at each stage, there was just a moment where I was like, I don't want to go into a single career path. I don't want to just become a banker. I don't want to just become a
Yeah.
healthcare consultant. I don't want to just become a blockchain dev. It has to be something that, spans a bunch of different areas of knowledge. And for lack of a better word, is something interdisciplinary. And so I think that's the one common thread, right? I now landed on something that is truly interdisciplinary and, pulls on the world of, emerging technologies, on bioethics, on
Yeah.
preclinical research. And so now, AminoChain has just become such a journey that I'm deep down in this rabbit hole. I don't think I could build anything else, but it all stemmed and started from just being incredibly curious about the world.
Staying curious, staying curious. I love that and having a passion for what you do. So, you just mentioned closing that $5 million seed round, especially with the backing of A16Z. I mean, that's incredible. So, can you tell us a little bit about what that kind of early stage was like, and how did you personally overcome any kind of self doubt that comes along with being a founder?
Yeah. You could probably talk about that for a really long time. I think the real journey, I mean, like actually what happened was I finished Columbia And I graduated and I was, on a post-student working visa, and I had like a limited amount of time to find a job. And I was like, okay, I've got this idea for the startup that I've been developing for the last year. Do I really have what it takes to make it my, vocation, my career? Or is
Yeah.
it better to try find something safe to do just so I can stay in the States and I can be in the industry and I can keep learning, and then I'll have the platform to jump over and, the security to really give the startup a go. But that time, as you mentioned, it was just high anxiety, it was high stress. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And then at the time when I finished university, I managed to get into Antler, this pre-seed accelerator. And that was really the springboard that I needed. I think, being in that environment where it's a set amount of time, it's 6 weeks, you've got a startup idea, you got in, so clearly there's something here to be discovered. But at the end of the 6 weeks, you'll find out whether it's venture investable or whether it's just something that you're going to daydream about. And that was the kind of structure that I needed, right? Because it was something I was working on the whole time and I couldn't stop thinking about. But I needed to know whether it had legs and I could turn it into a real business, right? So finishing Columbia, getting into Antler, working shoulder to shoulder with all of the venture partners there and whiteboarding and looking into the market and talking to key opinion leaders, vetting the idea, testing it out, building a prototype. At the end of it, we then got that pre-seed check from Antler, and that was around 150K. And that's what set us off. And I was like, boom, all right, well,
Huge.
now I've convinced somebody to give me their money to keep
Yeah.
exploring what I find interesting. I've got to double down and then just got to keep going into it, right? But at every level, there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of risk. What we were building obviously has never really been done before. So it was always just in your imagination. But at each step, it was like, an insurmountable task in front of us. But we managed to close it. And so now finally we're at the point where we can really give it a go and expand the team. And so it's a very exciting period to be in.
Awesome. That's incredible. And, tell us a little bit more about, what AminoChain's doing in terms of focusing on, decentralized healthcare applications. I mean, it's really a truly unique approach, and I'm sure that you're going to expand upon this a little bit. But my question would be, what really kind of excites you most about the potential impact of, or rather on kind of, I would say, patient autonomy and flexibility when it comes to medical research? And can you just give us a little bit more context to a little bit about what this is all about?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the world that we live in today, for cancer patients, when they partake within a scientific research study, the interaction is entirely a one-way street. And
Hmm.
so, what I mean by that is, you're a cancer patient, you're in the hospital, you're going to have surgery, and you're going to cut out this cancer, and somebody's going to come up to you and say, "Can we keep this biopsy sample for scientific research? Here's a consent document. Do you say yes or no?" Right? And then when the patient says yes, they sign the document, they give the sample, it's gone. They never see it again. They never know what happens with it, and they're barely ever kept in the loop, right? In the vast majority of cases. And what they don't know is that that sample is donated to scientific research. It's stored in a biobank. It's distributed many times over. It creates a lot of scientific insights, a lot of new knowledge, a lot of monetary upside because it's licensed all around the world. And none of that value is ever brought back to the person that made all of that research possible by donating the sample, right? So when we talk about patient autonomy today, consent documents, they give autonomy to the patients insofar as they have the right to say yes or no, and they have the right to be fully informed about what the research study is. But under federal regulations, you can always de-identify the sample and then reuse it again and not have to reconsent the patient. So they don't truly know what's going on with the samples when they donate them to research. And so the world has changed massively. Biobanking is now a thing. We store samples, for many years. We use them in many scientific studies. That's just going to keep growing as we get more and more into personalized medicine. But the consenting frameworks that we have today, they don't really meet the world that we live in right now, right? Because people have a one-time snapshot to exercise their autonomy, but then thereafter, the samples are donated and the ownership is given to the industry, to the researchers. And when they create insights and they create money out of it, that goes back to the people that characterize the samples, and none of it goes back to the actual patients, right? So there are ways to respect autonomy today, but I think they're flawed, and I think there's many ways in which they can be improved.
Yeah, in our original conversation, I was thinking about Henrietta Lacks, and a lot of people in the science and don't even know who this person is, but has made obviously tremendous impacts on medicine. And maybe can you talk a little bit more about your background, kind of in ethics and bioethics, and how does kind of your, I would say, academic work shape kind of your approach to kind of facing these challenges and tackling the challenges that AminoChain is facing today? And then maybe even to kind of talk to us a little bit, because there might be people listening like, how does blockchain come into this? So bring it all together full circle.
Yeah, exactly. So so the whole story of biomedical consenting in and of itself is we basically had the world's worst atrocities after the Second World War, in which there was an absolute breach of consent. There was a lot of horrific instances in which patient autonomy was not considered at all. And off
Yeah.
the back of that, you had the Nuremberg trials, and then you had the Helsinki declarations. And there was a bunch of like progressive movements to make sure that ethics was a little bit more steadfast going forward in research, and that you could never have the same atrocities again. You then had instances like the Tuskegee syphilis studies, you had the Henrietta Lacks case, and so on in the United States. And then in the United States in the late 70s, you had something called the Belmont Report. And the
Mm,
Belmont Report basically outlined what are the frameworks that we want within human subjects research that actually respect patients when they partake in studies. And they came on the ideas of beneficence, justice, and respect for persons, right? So those are the principles that we want within research. And out of those three principles came the framework of informed consent. So to have all these things that we want to respect patients in research for, we need to give them the right to say yes or no, and we need to make sure that they're fully informed about the study that's going on, and we need to have an equal representation of people within the study. Those are the principles, the pillars of biomedical consenting that we came up with off the back of the Belmont Report. And so that was hailed as a really progressive thing, right, in the 70s, because at the same time, you had a lot of other progressive movements happening. And so this was then effectively codified into law, right? You need to have IRBs that consent into protocols, and you need to have local IRBs that approve consenting frameworks.
yeah.
That was a great thing that happened then, but then the world has massively changed since the late 1970s, right? So within the world of biosamples and biobanking, there weren't really biobanks at that time. You didn't really have that much, storage of samples for secondary research use. That only really came in the 90s with the Human Genome Project, when samples were donated and we could get better at sequencing, and we understood the value of storing diseased tissue for secondary research, right? So now you have this growing industry of biobanks where people have informed consent and they donate samples into biobanks. And the biobanking industry is growing exponentially. That's coupled with an abundance of genomic information, of personalized medicine financing. Things are getting more and more tailored towards the individual patient. And all of that is possible because you have this huge characterization of donated samples that came from the patients. But all of this was donated under informed consent, meaning that you can only use it for a one-time study. And now the industry is facing this issue in which they have all of these samples. It costs so much money to store them. Everybody wants to use them, but you only really have the permission to use them, once in this instance under this protocol. And so then we came up with the idea of broad consent. Like, well, how about, when you donate a sample, you give permission that it can be used for anything. And that starts to, eat away a little bit at the patient autonomy because they don't really know what they're consenting to in that case. But then people say it's fine because we need to reuse the samples. And so this debate of, what do we do for societal interests and what do we do to respect the patients that are partaking within studies, that starts to come into fruition more and more in the 90s and then into the 2000s, right? And then eventually we come up with these other federal regulations that mean if you de-identify samples such that you can't find out who the patient is, then you can reuse the samples and you don't have to reconsent the patients. And so now that's the world that we live in today. There's 200 million biosamples across the United States. There's roughly 2,500 biobanks, and you can de-identify them and use them in studies, and the patients won't even have to be told that they're being used for other studies, right? And so now we're at the point where it's really hitting a tipping point. It's hitting a breaking point in terms of patient autonomy. We're not truly respecting the wishes anymore when they consent into research. And so our academic work, right, that we've come up with is a framework called demonstrated consent. And we believe that the future of biomedical consenting is going to be technology driven, and it's not going to be human based. And so what do we mean by that? Well, in our model, you can give your personalized conditions for broad use. So I can go to you, Trevor, and I can say, we want to get your sample and we want to give it into every single researcher's hands around the world because we want to generate as much knowledge as possible, first and foremost, for your benefit. But we want to do that safely. So you tell me what we can and can't do with it. And we can open up a dialogue about what it means to partake within research. And then you can say, look, I'm nervous about this, or, my religious background is this. And so I don't want that to happen. We can customize all your preferences into the metadata of an NFT that represents your sample. And then we have a mechanism in which that sample can be acquired by anybody in the world for protocols that uphold the consent. And so
Wow.
now you have the system in which the blockchain is distributing the samples to all these researchers, right? And it's being used many times. Moreover, you get the societal interest and you're truly respecting the patient's wishes. And the best part of all of it is the patient can see where the sample goes. They can always be informed. They have a continuous provision of information. They can always opt out or revert back to other types of consent. So they have their flexible autonomy longitudinally. And the notion here of why it's called demonstrated consent is because the blockchain is demonstrating to you that your consent is being upheld. It's not the researcher asking you for permission, it's you giving permission, and the blockchain telling you time and time again that your permission is still being listened to. And so we think that way technology will be able to open up research for the next 100 years, and it will truly respect the patient wishes.
Yeah, I mean, this is just mind blowing, honestly, with the capabilities, and it's really, really, really awesome that you've um, really brought all of this to fruition. And being that this really is a rapidly changing landscape, have you had any, I would say, pushback from traditional medicine, or this the scientific community? And kind of to build up on that a little bit more, what do you think needs to happen for healthcare in general to somewhat fully embrace this decentralized kind of mindset? And what role do you think that AminoChain is going to continue to play in that shift?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, bunch
Mhm.
of layers within all those questions. We can tackle them one by one. But yeah,
Yes.
was there pushback? Yeah, there was pushback. Like it was the early days were quite tricky, right? Because we when we started off this whole mission, we started off with the whole patient angle first and foremost, right? We're building a platform that lets patients track what happens with their samples. And it was just an interface where you can log on and you can see at a singular biobank in a nice, intuitive UI what's actually happening with your specimen after you donate it, right? And that was cool and it was engaging, and we got like one or two biobanks to try it out. But then very soon we realized that if we ever wanted to bridge this into the world of pharma or into, biotechs or any other preclinical type of research, translational research, then those big companies are going to get really freaked out at the idea that patients are seeing where the samples go, because pharma doesn't really want that, right? So
Mhm.
um, that angle had to be put down a little bit at the beginning, right? And so what we landed on instead, just to get going, was to build a actual marketplace for these researchers to acquire samples more easily for their research. So not necessarily engaging the patients just yet, but just getting a system for the pharma companies and the biobanks that they enjoy more, because there's actually a lot of infrastructural problems between providing samples for research and distributing them across different companies.
Mhm.
So that's what we're doing right now. We're going to these 2,500 biobanks. We're putting them onto the same platform. We're getting pharma companies onto that platform and letting them find, search for, acquire, license, and streamline the distribution of samples in a B2B manner, not letting the patients track it just yet. Then the goal is to let the patients benefit from the fact that it is being tracked, but not let them like directly see where it's going. So, for example, once you have the provenance between the samples, you could use that as a platform for clinical recruitment. You could use that as a platform for real world evidence. You could use it for many other applications, right? And those are the things that pharma certainly care about. And they'll see the benefits of that, of having it be patient centric, right?
Yeah.
And so once that's set up and pharma's loving the system now, the last step is to open it up to patients to let them see where their stuff goes. They have a better experience in partaking in research, so they reconsent and they give more valuable samples. You get more diverse biosample donors onto the platform because they have a better experience and they actually feel respected for the first time. And then when you get the rare samples onto the marketplace, then you draw more researchers to it. And then pharma says, well, if we want this super rare um, you know, brain cancer sample that also has an infectious disease and is well characterized and comes from this underrepresented region of the world, then we're going to have to be okay with the fact that there's a little bit of transparency for the patient that donated that. And then you create the world that you want to create, in which the patients can actually track where their things go. So
Yeah,
that's our strategy, and that's how we're building it.
I love it. From a bioethics perspective, what are kind of some of the steps that you think the industry could better take to better protect the privacy while still kind of pushing forth this innovation, particularly within healthcare and blockchain?
Sorry, there was a slight lag on that. Could you just repeat the question?
No, no worries. So, in terms of from a bioethics perspective,
Mhm.
what steps do you think that the tech industry could take to better pr- protect privacy while still pushing for innovation, particularly, within healthcare and blockchain?
Yeah. So I mean, from a tech perspective, what can the tech industry do about it, right? There's a bunch of companies like adjacent to the world in which we're operating, and that industry in of itself is quite nascent. It's called decentralized science. It's called DeSci
Yeah.
for short, right? So that's up and coming now, and there's a bunch of people building things that are focused on genomics. You own your own DNA. There's certain people focusing on sharing research assets between labs in a more B2B function. Some people just focusing on clinical data, getting data out of silos and getting that used. I think, what blockchain really unlocks is a level of interoperability that we've never been able to benefit from just yet, right? So I think what's great about DeSci is all of these projects that are working on little areas of the ecosystem will be able to plug into each other and allow an unprecedented network effect for everybody that's involved. So I think what we should do maybe towards the next like 5 years is focus on a common framework of privacy and focus on a common framework for achieving regulatory standards within a sort of crypto protocol level. So how do you have the right to be forgotten? How do you have the right to erase your data? How do you have the right to track where your things go? How do you have
Mm,
the right to make sure that contributors of data sets get paid equally for whatever they contribute? All of those things are quite intricate, and that's what all of us independently need to design. And then once it is designed, we can unlock a whole new level of interoperability between all these different projects.
awesome, awesome. So I want to shift gears here in the conversation. Time is flying by here. It always happens when we're having fun, right? Tell us a little bit more about AminoChain, the culture, the organization, and help me understand kind of the importance of how much emotional resilience plays in the role of being a leader. And second, that is, how do you balance kind of staying emotionally strong while managing the demands of leadership and just all the other things that life throws our way?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's been a whirlwind of an experience as well. So I mean, the culture of AminoChain is like first and foremost, we're building something that is very, very, very unique. It's very esoteric, right? So my mom's friends ask me like, "What do you do?" And I have to explain to them. It's really quite difficult when you have to explain what crypto is, and you have to explain about biobanking and what biosamples are, and people just like, "What the hell? Why didn't you just do something in fintech? Like it's so much more easy to understand." So it is very esoteric. It's very new, and so the people that we're hiring, I'd like to think all of them are truly one of a kind, and they fit together into this like greater scheme of our company and how well we work together. Truly, because they add a unique perspective that no one else would be able to. So we have hardcore blockchain devs, we have protocol engineers, we have people that are just data scientists, people that are working on ML of mapping different data sets against each other. And then we have bioethicists and we have, preclinical researchers with people with PhD backgrounds and so on. And so it's funny that I mentioned at the beginning that, what was the common thread back through all my experience to landing on AminoChain was curiosity. I would say the one thing that everybody at AminoChain has is curiosity. When we have our on-sites and when we have like team hangout sessions, is really awesome to see this guy that worked in blockchain, for 5 years as a smart contract dev, speak with somebody that just finished their PhD in neuroscience. The two
Yeah.
never thought that they would ever meet, but they're just interested in each other's work, right? And they like really want to understand it because what we're building is at such an intersection between healthcare and life science and blockchain. And so that's the culture that we have, and that's the culture that I really love. I think that people that are autodidactic, they go ahead and teach themselves things. They're curious about the world, and they can't sit still because they're so interested about everything going on. and about this new world that we can build together. That's what kind of draws us together, and that's what we look for in people that we bring to the team.
Nice. In terms of that, that leadership component and just really kind of staying emotionally resilient, right? And kind of handling the ups and downs of, you know, what life throws at us, and then just the fast-paced nature of our space. How do you stay grounded?
Yeah, that was also a really tough question. I've got a lot of amazing people around me with the support of family and really close friends and partners. I mean, they certainly do provide a level of balance for me. I think that has been a super big gift that I can never thank the people close to me enough for. And I think it's when you're building a startup and you're like getting sucked into the rabbit hole, you just turn on the blinders around the world sometimes, and you just can't see anything else except for what you're building. And you go to bed thinking about your startup, and you wake up and you think about, did this person finish the thing? Or am I able to do that thing next? And you just get really pulled into this world, and like having people that are able to ground you and pull you out of it every now and then and be like, yo, maybe just drink some water or eat some food, or hang out a little bit for the second is incredibly helpful, right? And if I didn't have that balance, then I probably would get sucked far too much into just keeping the blinders on, right? But at the same time, I think every now and then the blinders are helpful and they are productive, because maybe for some instances I don't want to go into too much detail on, but like I've experienced quite shocking, heartbreaking events quite recently, and I think that being able to have the heartbreak effectively fuel your
Yeah,
your work and your passion for something that you even more believe in now, because of so many other reasons that maybe I don't want to open up too much about. But it's very productive to be able to rely on your work ethic, but then it's also
yes.
very productive to realize and truly appreciate the people that know when to pull you out of it, right?
Yeah, and to be able to transmute those things, those feelings into positivity, and just the kind of drive to keep going, man. I definitely can relate to that for sure. So, in terms of, you know, kind of thinking about misconceptions here, what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions about the intersection of blockchain and healthcare, and how are you addressing these and just trying to educate the masses? Obviously, you're doing podcasts like this and you're at a bunch of different speaking engagements, but kind of what's your method to the madness?
Yeah, so I think blockchains right now, hopefully, you'd like to think they're having a moment, right? Like you think that now that they're truly being understood for the value of what they bring, right? But for the longest time, blockchain was synonymous with crypto, was synonymous with DeFi, was synonymous with Bitcoin, right? People didn't know the difference between all these things. But really, each one of those things opens up a whole new world. So then when we go to healthcare companies and we're like, we're building a blockchain-based system for tracking data, they're just like, oh, my nephew told me about Bitcoin once, and I'm like, no, it's not not the same thing. So it's quite hard, right? Or it has been super difficult when we go to these biobanking conferences and we talk to people about what blockchain is. We try to demystify the technology. We try to say, don't be scared of it. I promise you, it can help in so many different ways for the
Mm,
problems that we face daily as a biobanker and so on. I think there's definitely a important narrative to build around why blockchain is so pivotal and so important for the future of healthcare. And we really hope that AminoChain will be one of those founding companies to build that story and to tell that story. The way that we've decided to do that is with human subjects research, with bioethics, and with biobanking. But once we've nailed that niche, the world is, our oyster. It can be as big as any other blockchain protocol out there, because just like healthcare and finance have the similarities of being trillion-dollar industries where middlemen suck out all the value and participants get left behind. Blockchains can
yeah,
democratize all of that, right? They can bring back equity and rightful benefit to the people that make all of this stuff possible. And that's the same case in payments and finance, and it's the case within healthcare, right? With data that's used in preclinical research. So blockchains are phenomenal at cutting out the middleman and democratizing value in the most simplest form, right? And we can be that protocol that does that for healthcare, and we can tell that story, right? And we've decided to tell that first and foremost from a biobanking perspective.
and the potential of, I mean, all of this, right? Decentralized Health data ownership, it's huge. It's huge. But obviously, as you're mentioning here, it's a complex challenge. So, how do you kind of prioritize the user experience while still ensuring that you're within regulatory compliance? Because that's something that we haven't even started to talk about. And from previously working in biotech and pharma and healthcare, I know that that's obviously something that you cannot ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not something that you like cannot ignore. It's something that's the very basis of what you're doing, right? Like you need to have compliance embedded into the protocol that you build.
Yeah.
But I am, the hard set 200% convinced that the world's most elegant solution does exist. It's out there. There is something that truly embeds HIPAA and GDPR and 21 parts CFR 11, um, compliance and like all of these different things. There is a way to embed that into a blockchain protocol and to allow developers to build dApps that benefit, many people. So I don't think it's something that we need to be scared of. I actually think that the stigma
Yeah.
of like, oh, it's so much regulatory, it's so many regulatory restrictions that we shouldn't even try to innovate in the space is even more reason to innovate in the space. Because once you've done all of that hard work to hit regulatory compliance and it's a better system and it democratizes value, it it is something that's able to completely undercut the way things are done right now, right? And then once you've done that, it's the only way that things will be done for the future. So I think that if things are quite difficult and they have a lot of regulation around them, it's even more reason to try to innovate in that space. That's the first thing. But then the other part of your question was like, how do you do that, right? And how do you get that for the actual end user?
Yeah.
And the answer is you hide the wires. You just give them an interface that they love, and then when they do things on it, it looks like magic, and they're like, "How the hell did you do that?" You know? And then they ask questions, and then they get curious, right? That's one thing that we've certainly learned is just work backwards from the interface. Even if you haven't embedded ZK proofs into your app yet, just build something on Figma, show them what it would look like when the ZK proof works, and then watch people fall off their seat and they're like, holy crap, are you able to do that? And we're like, that's what we're building. And then they get excited, and then they don't want to be the ones to be left out, and then they want to be your first investors or your first users. So
Yeah. And for those that may not be technically savvy or maybe newcomers to the space, tell us a little bit about what ZK proofs are all about, and from just a very basic, simplistic understanding of the meaning of that.
yeah, absolutely. So ZK proofs stand for zero knowledge proofs, and they're a type of effectively mathematical function that exists on blockchains that allow you to find out something about a data set without revealing the data itself. So, in its most simplest form, or the way that I could put it into the context of biobanking, you could hold a sample in the lab. You could be working with this de-identified biospecimen, and you characterize it, you research it, and you find out that it has a certain HLA polymorphism in its genomics. So, a certain type of DNA, a certain mutation, if you will. And now I think this is quite interesting. It has this mutation. I think that this is a causal mutation for MS, but I don't really know. I need to now figure out how many people in the world have this mutation and have MS. And so the world that we live in today is I'll go contract with a real world evidence company. They'll charge me millions. It'll take, a long time. And they'll go out and find that evidence that these people with this gene have MS. Now, on a blockchain based world, you have a sample that has the mutation. You could just push one button and have a zero knowledge proof that is connected back to the medical records of the patient that donated the sample, be able to prove to you that the person has MS or they don't have MS, and you don't have to spend many years or many millions of dollars trying to figure that out, right? So that seems like magic for these scientists because they're like, oh, my workflow is only ever take the sample, find out the insight, and then give the insight to my superior, and then they'll go run with it and do the next step. But I'm actually able to do the real world evidence, find out the information, and keep going from the specimens that I've used in my research. So that's why it's such a big unlock.
Yeah, it's honestly quite mind blowing. I mean, just thinking about how this can speed up clinical trials, just overall getting so much more data into scientists' hands that they probably never were able to get at such a rapid speed before. And as you mentioned before, right, just having ability to get that quickly. So it's quite disruptive. And speaking of, the industry being ripe for disruption, as you mentioned before, what do you think is the most important shift that probably needs to take place in the next 5 years or so to really kind of enable blockchain to truly change the game here?
That's a really good question as well. I think, you know, our approach, especially from the things that I was just talking about right now, is um, I gave examples of how blockchain infrastructure could be used for new applications, and that's a thing in and of itself that maybe doesn't need too much change within a regulatory environment. But some blockchain protocols and truly decentralized blockchain protocols, they rely on something called a native token to really survive, right? So if you have a tokenomic model where there's a crypto asset that's used for people that are building decentralized applications on top of the blockchain, then that's a totally different ball game. And I think today we don't have a lot of correct frameworks for people that are trying to launch crypto assets or trying to launch tokens. And a lot of times when people launch things like meme coins, or they launch, crypto assets with a lot of marketing behind it, but absolutely no value, then you end up in these scenarios which people call pump and dumps, where there's a lot of marketing, the value goes up, the thing gets sold, and everybody gets burned and they lose all their money. So, I mean, what I would really love to see for the blockchain industry as a whole is an SEC type body that is able to validate what a crypto asset is. And did I cut out for a second? Am I still here? Or back? Okay, cool. Yeah. So I'd love to see an SEC type body that effectively says, what is a crypto asset? How is it, come into fruition? When can you have an initial coin offering? How do you underwrite that value? And how do you make sure investors know that the value can go up and down? And if you're able to do that safely, then you can have, retail investors and normal people and, healthcare professionals get involved in decentralized crypto environments. But today, if we were to launch a token and it's, we just give it to the people and it goes up and down, we would lose our users instantly, right? Everyone would say, I'm too worried about this thing going all over the show. But if we were able to, backtrack that against rules and regulations from the government, then we would be able to do that a lot safer, right? So I think over the next 5 years, finding ways to make crypto more legitimate, make blockchain development more legitimate, and having safe and effective ways for people to register their crypto assets. That's the most important thing for everybody working within the blockchain industry.
And so, kind of back to the question, I was just kind of thinking about unexpected challenges. Funny that we just had that with the internet, right? So, the unexpected challenges that you face, what's one of them that is something that you kind of didn't expect? And how did you overcome that?
Unexpected challenges. Let's see. Um, well, I think yeah, there's an ongoing story, right, which is like difficult to build right now, which is like, are we a crypto company or are we a healthcare company?
Mm,
And when you're raising money, right, do you go to crypto funds or do you go to healthcare funds? Like, I mean, who's interested in what you're doing? And like, when you go to convince your users, do you go with, do you not explain blockchain at all, or do you explain it a little bit? So we kept grappling with these things for a while. But then I think the main thing that we were challenged by was, I just had it, but now it's left my thoughts. Um, Sorry, I'm going to come back in a second. I just had it and now I'm forgetting.
no, because I mean, there's just so much that probably that's
Yeah.
unexpected that you can think of. In terms of, kind of gaining traction in healthcare, how do you kind of help, I would say, maintain this balance of kind of ensuring that kind of high impact adoption that's not kind of overwhelming to the existing system, that's going to change it too quickly? I mean, do you ever kind of feel like that may happen, or is that maybe a reason for the initial pushback? Because it can
Mm.
change things so fast.
So I just thought of my thing for the unexpected challenges thing. So I'm
Yeah.
really going to come back to that. So basically, yeah, we started off with basically what my build up was, are we crypto, are we healthcare? We had that realization, especially when we finished our seed round, because we had an architecture at the beginning like between our pre-seed and our seed, where we turned biosamples into NFTs, and we had an NFT marketplace, and we let people license those between a handful of biobanks, right? Once we closed the seed funding, we said, cool, let's scale the system. Let's just go bigger to more biobanks. And then we would hit an instance where we get to one biobank and they have 8 million samples. And last week, they just did a transaction where they moved 1 million FFP slides from one place to the next. And we very quickly realized that the system that we built wasn't actually going to be able to scale, because it's actually super expensive to mint 80,000 NFTs. And moving 1 million NFTs from one place to the next is quite, it reveals a lot of information about the users that people don't want to have public, right? So we hit these instances where we had growing pains from the initial protocol, or in the initial platform that we designed. And so we went to the drawing board and we tried to find ways to make this cheaper, and trying to find ways to, hide the wires and to hide the information that's publicly available. And then as soon as we did that, we also realized that there's a whole data science element to this as well, because when you have different biobanks, they call the same sample different things. And so you need to build a good search schema so that you can map, searchability across different inventory collections. And then we realized that we couldn't do anything before we had a designer in place, because we needed to get all of our Figma off the ground and realize that to scale, because we had all these different ideas coming in. And so then we quickly found out that we said, okay, right now for the next 6 months, we're going to scrap all things blockchain, and we're just going to focus on, the data science problems and the initial usability testing problems. So that was an unexpected thing that we didn't know, right? Because something was working. We raised money and we tried to scale it, and we were like, oh, that's totally not going to scale. So then we had to go back to the drawing board. And then that just goes to show basically that the learning is that, development is always an ongoing thing. And you always have to go back to building. You think, you build for a bit and then sell it. That's totally not true. Like you just build the whole time, and you learn new stuff the whole time. And you always have to iterate on how you're building and what your strategy is. So that was an unexpected thing that I've definitely learned.
Nice, nice. I love that. And kind of back to this question about, as AminoChain does gain traction in healthcare, and how do you kind of plan to maintain the balance of ensuring this kind of high impact adoption, but not overwhelming the existing system too much and too quickly?
Yeah, that's a totally good question as well. The way that we do that is that we integrate into the existing tech stacks of these biobanks, right? So we don't replace anything. And that's a really good, learning that we've had as well, because people don't like changing systems. They like, the thing that they just learn how to use properly. And so we decided to work backwards from their existing tech stack and build on top of it and find new ways to provide value for those customers. And so I think that's effectively what we decided to do. And working from that, that's going to be the most important thing for the industry as a whole. You want to integrate into the workflows that currently exist, and then you want to just provide new features that blow their minds. That's the goal, right? So you just connect silos into one place, or you take things out of silos so that things are connected into a better system. And then when you have that, people have new applications, and when they have new applications, then they come and they use those. It's not necessarily about taking the lunch of one entity, or cutting these people out here. You can do a lot of
Yeah.
work that everybody benefits from just by creating a better connected system to begin with, and that's what we're doing first and foremost.
I love it. I love it. So, kind of wrapping up here, time is running out. I want to make sure that we give some time for you to talk about what's kind of currently going on right now with AminoChain, and what's coming up down the in the future, in the near future. But kind of, I would say this entrepreneurial journey can be rather addictive. So, for someone that's considering potentially even doing a startup of their own, what advice would you give about just finding your passion um, in the grind while staying focused on the bigger picture ultimately?
Yeah, such a good question. I think, those early days are so tough. Like, I mean, even after your first pre-seed money or whatever, it's like, once you've had a little bit of a high, like the lows can really be lonely.
Yeah,
So I can remember unbelievably vividly when we just raised, the initial money with Antler, and it was 150K, and it was just enough to get us going. But we then had to, make 5 people survive on that because we had all of the folks that we did the hackathon with, and we stretched it for a whole year, and we still had half of it left before we did our pre-seed round, just because we were like, this is never going to run out. We have to protect this with all my, with all our might. It's in that sort of very, very early pre-seed stage. It's a very intuitive game of, here's X amount of cash and resources that I have on my screen that I can use. And here's all the energy that I have to get something done. And the name of the game is make that number not go down and do as much as possible to move the needle. And it's easy, right? It's you and your co-founders, and you know how to do that, right? The internet is an open thing. You can go and ask to speak to people. You can try to build something. Anybody can code anything, and you can make sure that your number doesn't go down on the screen. So, but when you're in that environment, it can feel really daunting, right? And every dollar that you spend really hurts you, and every small win that you have means the absolute world. And so we had endless months, or I think I had endless months, where I was in a WeWork in Midtown in New York, and it was just my coffee and my laptop, and I was sitting there, and I was there to the early hours of the morning, and I just always felt like it's me against the world and my laptop. Like this is my only tool to fight all the things in
Yeah.
my head. That's the only way to get it done. And so for anybody that's in that situation, I just first and foremost want to say that, like, I've got the most utmost respect, like, tremendous respect for anybody that decides to put themselves through that. But then on the other side, if you find yourself unable to do anything else, right, and just truly passionate about sitting there and wanting to do more stuff on your computer and move the needle more and find out a new bit of information and ship that new feature, then there really is a whole world for you to discover. That's what true founders are made of, right? It's getting completely obsessed with the fact that you're being punched in the face like time and time again. And so for anybody that's starting that up now, I would say, you know, your big end vision is what's driving you, and you should always have that, fuel you as you go. And if you just don't stop, then at some point you will be successful. It's a matter of, it's not, if, it's just when. If you're able to endure it long enough, it's gonna happen. So, like, you can always go to bed knowing that you just have to get up and get punched in the face the next day, but eventually you're gonna get, not punched that hard anymore. So it's like, I think to anybody out there in that situation, I would just say, just keep going, don't stop.
Nice. And to build on that, right? After, I mean, the last few years have just been crazy for anyone that's been in this industry professionally. But, you mentioned you kind of went through some personal things as well. So, what would you say, maybe one or even a few key life lessons that you've learned from these experience and that you believe others should probably take to heart as well?
Key life lessons, I think. It's such a classic one, I think, that I've learned from other mentors that I respect as well. But invest in the people. I think it's, if you find the right people that you're on the journey with, then just cherish them, and be respectful, and know how to work with people and your right balances and so on. But if you find somebody that you can work with in a really good flow, that you know takes your ideas and 3x's them in a way that maybe you couldn't. If you find that compatibility and you find people that want to work with you on things that you both truly care about, then that's a blessing. That is an absolute blessing. I think there's no greater gift in life than being able to choose what to work on and who to work with.
Yes.
I think that if you're able to do that and you find something that's, doesn't matter if it's going well, if it's going badly, but you have the right people with you that are on the same boat and really on the same wavelength, that's a real blessing that you should invest in and not take for granted, and then just enjoy the ride with those people.
Yes, at the end of the day, people matter. At the end of the day, people matter. So let's take the little bit of time that we have left here to just kind of talk to us a little bit about what's going on right now at AminoChain. I know that you mentioned that you were hiring. I did see in the comments a couple of folks asked to get more insight on those roles. So we're not going to give the entire job description, but what are some quick things that you're looking for right now? Also, to our community is filled with people that might be looking to contribute, volunteer, or just to get involved in some other capacity. So tell us a little bit about kind of the current state of the union when it comes to hiring, and then also how maybe people can get more involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're roughly around 10 people right now, and we're looking to hire another four. We're looking for full stack devs. We're looking for front end devs. We're looking for back end devs, and we're looking for ML engineers to help on the search schema side of things. So all product oriented builders, people that perhaps have a passion for healthcare, have experience within crypto. We would love to hear from you if you're a diehard 10x engineer and you have a passion of working on some of the hardest problems in the world for people that really need solutions. We would love to hear from you. Please do reach out. We're open up on LinkedIn. We have our job boards posted on Workable. I can maybe even drop that in the chat. But anybody that's curious, please do reach out. We also have a couple of internship roles. We're looking for people to
Nice.
help us on user experience research, on UX design. We've actually just hired an intern to come in into our data science team at the moment.
Nice.
Today was
Congrats.
his first day. So yeah, all very exciting. And anybody that shows clear proactivism and interest in what we're doing, um, I will always reply to their email. I think
Yeah.
anybody that takes initiative and says, "Oh, I researched this and I thought that this might be of interest to you," I will. If you're a student or you're an advanced career person, I think if you seem like a really great person, we'll likely find a role for you to fit in and find a way to help out with Amino.
Yeah, I think that being proactive is such an important thing. A lot of people just wait for a job to be posted, but there's so much going on internally with an organization where they can contribute and get involved before that happens. So, in terms of conferences, events, anything else that your team is going, do you all have any other things that folks can follow just to kind of stay aware?
Yeah, totally. So we will be at ETH Denver. We will be over in Denver. We will be spreading the DeSci narrative. We'll be with all of our DeSci friends over there. Um, Aside from that, we will be at some biobanking conferences. So there's a couple coming up in Canada later this year for all the biobank listeners on Just Shilling. We will be at ISWR and we will be at other ones in Toronto as well. And aside from that, we are heads down building, and we're looking for builders that want to come build with us. And I think that's the main priority. We will have a big release in May this year, and that will be around the time as one of these conferences that we're going to go to. And when that's open, we'll come back on Just Shilling and have another chat.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your incredible insights. I've learned even more today to now send me down even more rabbit holes to continue to learn about this um, awesome kind of use cases and really the potential of just making people's lives better. So thank you for joining, and for everyone that is tuning in, we will get some clips up shortly. We're going to get this full episode here up to YouTube. I'll probably edit out that little internet connection issue there, but really thank you for taking the time, and super psyched to see what AminoChain does. And for all those that joined, I know that you can be doing anything in the world, but you chose to join us, and I really appreciate all of you, and look forward to joining you all again in the near future for another conversation. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trevor. It was a great time.
Bye.